Talking about fraud. This place has become one of the epicenters for fraud, waste, and abuse in America. $3.5 billion just here in Los Angeles County, we think, around hospice and home health care.
So the federal government has opened up a new front in America's war on fraud. And it's brought them to California, where the scams ripping off our country not only mirror those found in Minnesota, like fake daycare centers, but expand upon those schemes with brand new ones, which, as you're about to see, are even worse.
Man was contracted with the city and county of Los Angeles to house and feed up to 600 homeless people, but instead he was misusing tens of millions of dollars to live a luxurious life.
How is accountability measured by the state?
How many volunteers you house, what the weather is like. It's, there's been a lot of, so it's an imperfect process, and I'm not naive about that.
These fraudsters, and these do tend to be foreign influences. These are Russian Armenian gangs, mafia, that are leading a lot of these efforts, we believe, have been able to corrupt and work with doctors who are willing to lie.
California.
Man, this is nuts. I don't even know what to think right now. Man, oh man. Here we go again. I just don't know where the boomer goes. Where is she, sleepy Tuss? Where is a boomer lost? Where is a boomer lost? She's conked on the bed. Okay, let's get back to this. But this is completely insane.
I'm here in Los Angeles. We're talking about fraud. This place has become one of the epicenters for fraud, waste, and abuse in America. $3.5 billion just here in Los Angeles County, we think, around hospice and home health care.
So the federal government has opened up a new front in America's war on fraud. And it's brought them to California, where the scams ripping off our country not only mirror those found in Minnesota, like fake daycare centers, but expand upon those schemes with brand new ones, which, as you're about to see, are even worse.
Man was contracted with the city and county of Los Angeles to house and feed up to 600 homeless people, but instead he was misusing tens of millions of dollars to live a luxurious life.
How is accountability measured by the state?
How many volunteers you house, what the weather is like. It's, there's been a lot of, so it's an imperfect process, and I'm not naive about that.
These fraudsters, and these do tend to be foreign influences. These are Russian Armenian gangs, mafia, that are leading a lot of these efforts, we believe, have been able to corrupt and work with doctors who are willing to lie.
California has spent $24 billion in the last 5 years on homelessness, and no one can account for where that money has really gone for. So the first thing I did was set up that task force, and all we did is follow the money.
We are seeing real progress, and we are investing in what we know works.
What we have witnessed is a 7-fold increase in hospice in LA County. 7-fold. That doesn't happen naturally.
So according to the vice president, the fraud happening in California is way worse than Minnesota. And what nobody's talking about is that even Minnesota, with its fake daycare centers and all the stuff they got going on over there, That's just the tip of the iceberg. We're barely scratching the surface on fraud in this country. But as America watches the walls close in on Tim Walz and Ilhan Omar, California's governor has got to be terrified, as the same types of fraud operations there are not only being discovered in California, but seem to be much more numerous, with even less guardrails, allowing scammers a wide open back door into America's bank, where they steal billions every year. But here's where things get even worse, because it looks like in California, we've got mafia groups and cartel-linked gangs running some of these operations, which means America isn't just getting ripped off, it's getting robbed to fund criminals who may not even be within the US itself, revealing that our welfare state supposedly funding medical clinics and homeless outreach for the less fortunate is actually propping up fugitives across the globe. But that brings us to the real reason the federal government is now in California investigating all of this stuff. These scams, these $7 billion scams, these cannot exist without a political support apparatus. That's right, we're talking about state-sponsored fraud. And here's how that works. Politicians pass laws and enact programs that are impossible to supervise, either because they're hard to access in the case of home-based daycares, or because they allow an unlimited number of medical facilities to just open up and then bill the government, with nobody ever coming by to check on these places until now.
So you can see these are medical buildings. They've got Cyrillic writing, Russian, Armenian writing. On both sides, there's lots of action, it seems. I don't know how many patients are getting care, but in this 4-block area in Los Angeles, there are 42 hospices. So either there are a lot of people here, or you've got a fraudulent activity that is so good that everyone wants to get in on it.
So this is how you figure out which places are a scam and which ones are legitimately helping people. You go by and you look at the place, see who comes in and out, find out what's going on, and there's something going on here. All right.
I'm in Van Nuys in Los Angeles, and this boarded up area above my head here is a big hospice center. There are apparently quite a few hospices around here, 42 within a 4-block radius. And these guys stole $16 million. Listen carefully. The main guy went to jail for 2 years, stealing $16 million, which is a good trade-off for a lot of folks. And if you look at it, it's pretty indescript. There wasn't anyone really in there. They weren't doing any services. They just got an address they could claim was a hospice. And then they ran the business, claiming people were at home getting services, which they really weren't. What we have learned is there's roughly $3.5 billion of fraud taking place.
Where have we heard this before? Oh yeah, right, Minnesota. It's the same playbook all over again. Get an address, put a sign on the door, bill the federal government, and get rich. But it gets worse.
In hospice and home care, it's run quite a bit of it by the Russian Armenian mafia. You notice the lettering and language behind me is of that dialect. And it also highlights the fact that this is an organized crime, mafia deal, where you've got folks who have systematically recruited doctors to write false prescriptions, hundreds of doctors participating. They've got 100,000 patients who they've tricked.
Now, this is something that folks like Governor Gavin Newsom, who wants to be president someday, need to take very seriously, because what has been allowed to happen here is a criminal underworld has come in and is now out in the open. They control all of this stuff. You've got an entire illegal economy going on here, all paid for by the federal government with the help of California not watching what's happening. But wait, fraud in California, it doesn't just exploit the medical industrial complex. Oh no, that's not it.
42-year-old Alexander Suker was arrested. Suker's $125,000 Land Rover was also seized by law enforcement. The feds say Suker defrauded the city and county of LA out of $23 million in taxpayer dollars for not only his mansion and car, but a second home in Greece, luxury vacations, designer clothes, and private schools.
Right. The homeless industrial complex, that's getting exploited too. This guy got $23 million and spent it all on himself. And this is just one case. There's a whole bunch of these going on right now.
Prosecutors say Sucre was supposed to provide 3 nutritional meals a day to the homeless, but during one inspection, Sucre only had canned beans and ramen noodles on hand. The U.S. Attorney's Office in L.A. says they are actively investigating at least 12 other similar fraud cases here in California.
Wow. So there are 12 other investigations just like this one. And who is it that's in there shutting these down? Is it somebody at the state level? Oh, no. This is the U.S. Attorney General's office who is going after this stuff. This is a federal investigation into the plundering of federal dollars. But now the big question is, why is it that California has so many of these fraudulent programs that just seem to send millions and billions of dollars into black holes where nothing ever happens? And why aren't people like the governor at all interested in investigating this stuff before the federal government comes in?
Fraud on a level that no other state and no other country really has. So here's just a good example. $31 billion spent on the homeless industrial complex in California over the last couple of years. $31 billion, for perspective, is larger than the GDP of over 100 countries on Earth. California is spending that kind of money and getting what result exactly? They spent it and they increased the amount of homeless in their streets. Now, the reason that this is happening is because these nonprofits who supposedly fight homelessness are very, very profitable. A lot of them rake in hundreds of millions of dollars of federal money. And I think this is critical for your audience to understand. It's not California liberals lighting their own money on fire in a burn barrel. They can do that, and they do. These are federal dollars. A lot of these dollars are tied to HUD, housing.
So scamming the federal government. It's a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry. These scammers essentially have their own country in California, a sanctuary state. Who would have thought? But now the question is, these scammers that are just getting rich and have their own country and are earning billions of dollars, who do you think they're going to align themselves with when it's election time? Somebody that wants to crack down on them? Of course not. We saw how this works in Minnesota, where you've got folks like Ilhan Omar and Governor Walz at election-related parties and fundraisers thrown by the very people scamming their state. And what's going on here is the fraudsters and these complexes, like the homeless industrial complex, fully support those who fund them, like Governor Newsom, whether he knows it or not. And here's the thing, if you're gonna run against somebody like Governor Newsom in a place like California, you better not touch the fraud operations. If you come in and you say you're gonna defund these things, well, the scammers are gonna turn around and rally the troops and say you want to see Angelinos living on the streets. They'll say you're no friend of California, that you're an enemy of the people, and that you're heartless. And they're going to say that not so that they can get money from people in California, but no, so that they can get federal money, which reveals that the federal government probably shouldn't have programs that tax the entire country to then take that money and distribute it to various places who may just give it to somebody who's completely breaking the law.
Urban development. These dollars come from your taxes and mine, even if I'm safe and sound here in the state of Florida.
Don't tell me that the prior Justice Department couldn't have sniffed this out.
They could have.
If they wanted to. When you have the head of Abundant Blessings homeless charity living in a $7 million house and driving a 6-figure automobile.
Right. While people live on the street.
These are like obvious frauds. Like, let us get on the case. I mean, this is how easy it is to suss this out. And they don't do it because they're part of the con.
Right, 100% right. You've got this con that is exclusively benefiting not the Republican Party in this country. This is a one-sided benefit that hits the left side of America. And you know what? It runs all the way up the food chain, because guess what? If you want to run for president in this country, it would sure help to get the endorsement of a prestigious governor like that of California, right? You see what's happening here? There needs to be unity on one side of the aisle for people to support that candidate, and that candidate can't come in and say they want to touch the fraud. And this gets even scarier when you realize that the president and vice president were almost Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz, who would have been in charge of cracking down on the schemes going on in their states and here in California. Do we really think they would have sent the attorney general and an army of DHS officials to figure out what's going on and stop our country from getting robbed? Probably not, which is embarrassing. Because when you see 42 care centers in a 3-block radius and no people walking around on the streets, something weird's going on. Or when you see the people who are supposed to be caring for the homeless living in multi-million-dollar mansions, while the hungry folks they're supposed to be feeding are living in tents on the side of the road, there's a big problem, which reveals that all of this, these crises, as they're called, these are all funding mechanisms. A bunch of kids who don't have food after school. Oh, guess what? That's a crisis, yes, but it's also a funding mechanism. If I set up a charity that is then going to get that money to feed those kids, now I can get paid by the federal government. You see how this works? The same thing with the guy that's living in the multi-million-dollar mansion. He says, gee, there's all these people living on the streets. We got a massive homeless crisis going on in California. Oh, if only somebody would help. Well, gee, I'll set up a company that's supposed to help, and then I'll just help myself. These people are funding themselves. They are funding their lifestyles, and they are not going to be knee-deep in the weeds of accumulating government contracts without rubbing shoulders with the people who pass new laws to set up new contracts and can block you from getting a contract. So they feel compelled to donate and support these elected officials.
That you are beginning to see are only happening because of the Trump justice system.
Right.
They're not happening because of California policing itself. It's California and the homeless industrial complex that profits off this. Gavin Newsom's friends, the people who are running the state. It's a criminal enterprise. They are fleecing the American taxpayer, and now it has to fall to the Trump Justice Department to actually prosecute. We're going to help them.
You know what's crazy about this? Had the last election gone the other way, it's not that we would have a president who's prosecuting fraud in places like Minnesota and California. No, the fraud schemes in those places would end up exporting themselves to every state. Because whose job is it to shut these things down? The people running the country, the people running those states. And if that doesn't happen, nobody's going to come in and stop any of this, and scammers are going to take the whole place over. I know that sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. They've already taken over Minnesota. They've already taken over California. They're living in mansions right now. People are living on the street. This is a completely unfair system. And when you hear folks talk about shrinking the size of the federal government, this is what they're talking about. Don't have a massive system that taxes the entire country to just dish money out to people who want to live in mansions. Don't dish this money out to people who live in states that have turned themselves against our country to support people who do not make it a better place at all, while maintaining a perpetual power apparatus in these deep blue strongholds.
Just in the 3 cases we've charged, we're already looking at over 100 million, and we are just getting started. We have more than 24 investigations going. And what's crazy about this, Laura, is the egregiousness. There was no vetting and handing the money out, and there's no checking to make sure the money's actually being used. This guy we arrested today who ran this nonprofit was supposed to be housing 600 homeless people and giving them 3 meals a day. He bought a mansion in Westwood. He bought a vacation home in Greece.
Wow.
He bought a Range Rover, and he went shopping at Hermes and stayed at...
I think there is vetting, but it's not the kind of vetting that you're supposed to do. No, it's the opposite. When a guy like this on the screen right here, who enriched himself at the expense of the American people, wants to get a government contract, well, he's not the only person that wants that contract. They could only give that contract to 600 homeless people to one company. So who do you think gets it? Is it somebody who is critical of Governor Gavin Newsom? Is it somebody who's critical of people robbing the homeless industrial complex in the state? Is this somebody who's calling out leadership for benefiting potentially from abusive systems that they helped pass and refused to check up on? Of course not. They're giving these contracts to people who can be trusted.
Homelessness, it's a large state, obviously, has the most homeless in the country. And homelessness has gotten worse year after year, has it not?
It has not improved. We're basically importing all the homeless people from around the country.
Wow.
The weather's great here. California gives very generous services. And
wow, so California, not only are the systems in place to enrich those who care for the homeless, but they dole out enough benefits and have certain laws and policies that enable someone who wants to remain homeless to do so without actually getting the help that they need.
They wither away in the distant lands that you do not see. In the places where they don't want to be in public eye because they know that they seem like they're a nuisance because they've been told, the civilization above them has been saying, we've been giving money to your problem, and they haven't been receiving this money. So they feel, one, left in the cold. B, they're not going to get fed. C, they see that maybe there was transfer of money, but they're not getting it, and they can't do anything about it. Do you understand how infuriating that is? How frustrating that could be? When this is your lifeline. This is everything that you were begging for. And it was for somebody else. It's all for somebody's land, Range Rover, something, some exotic item. It's disgusting.
That is sad. That is tragic. That is a system that harms people just so they can be perpetually exploited. The people who create these systems see every single tent on the street as a dollar sign. That's money to them because that's the crisis that they can exploit. If those tents weren't there, you can't have a massive homeless industrial complex profiting off them.
Flock here. We have a disproportionate number of the homeless people in California, and their policy.
You're right, Cash. You're right. This is exactly why the homeless tents never go away. It was all planned. The fentanyl was supposed to attack the people on the streets, the ones that were vulnerable, the ones that may want a drug to get away from their shit in life. That was really strong, apparently. Never had it, never don't want to do it. But apparently these people ruined their lives because they can't get off of the stuff that's like 1,000 times stronger than heroin. So when we just slept on that, the cartels got billions of dollars to fund an illegal empire, but they were already in. They were already literally 2 million people deep in this like gray area where we don't know where they went, right? So, but they're here, they're getting stuff. We know they're alive. They're in our economy. What are we going to do about this? Talk about rogue. What are we going to do about this? It's not just, oh, poof, there goes the money, it's gone now, let's get more money to feed the problem. That didn't work. We gave money to the problem and it didn't work. So we have to have consequences for what didn't work before we can give money to something again that we might not. What are we stupid? We're just supposed to keep giving money to us forever? I don't even want us to get tax money. And I'm in California. We don't deserve it. You walk around, people are not helping each other. Why are you going to give people benefits? How are you? I mean, they're not helping their better man. Wise man JFK said, think not what you can do, or ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. My dog's trying to jump off. She's trying to jump off, so I have to play goalie, guys. But here, back to this.
Policies that track them. Okay, the public has said we want to fix it. We're willing to pay the taxes. And so, but the money's not going to its intended cause. That's the problem with states like California. They are the masters of fraud. They enable the fraud because there's no accountability, there's no vetting, there's no checking, because all they care about is the headline and appeasing their political constituencies who are all these
There is accountability. Let's say you're the guy that gets this $23 million from the government to care for 600 homeless people. What kind of accountability do you think he was subjected to? Well, was he donating? Was he supporting the cause? Was he drumming up support to get people elected? You see, that's what's going on here. Just like Dr. Oz is showing us that we have these gangs of criminals, these mafia groups, these cartels that are out there going after doctors, going after patients, trying to get all their money. We've got the exact same thing here with the federal government, who is paying for these states to dole out their money. They're the ones who are out there checking up on all these contracts, making sure that these people are being good stewards of the opportunity they've been given, just not in the way that does what it's supposed to, not in the way that helps Americans who are homeless.
Doctors participating. They've got 100,000 patients who they've tricked or paid to give them their beneficiary numbers so they can perpetuate the fraud. And then the criminals are just running the whole organization and quickly scurrying away when law enforcement does get around to prosecuting them. Unfortunately, in California, there has not been a lot of attention on these problems. That's going to change.
So you've got two scams going on here. You've got the zero guardrail systems that are being exploited by scammers who then pressure local officials into passing more laws that enable more of their scams, like these fake medical offices, these fake clinics, these bogus hospice centers. That's one aspect of it. These are organized criminals. These are gangs. And then you've got the people that approach the government to get these massive contracts and are well connected. That's who gets contracts. People who know somebody. You better know somebody if you want a $23 million contract. That's how government money works. And you know what? Government funding of anything is totally unfair to the majority of American people, especially when they are the ones who are being taxed to pay for all that stuff. So when you hear people talk about shrinking the size of the federal government, reducing the size of the federal government, that's the heart of the argument there. I can't go out and get a government contract. I don't know anybody who's going to let me get that. It's like winning the lottery. It's this new gold rush that people are after, but it's not really a lottery if you know the right people. It's not really a lottery if the person who's going to give you the contract knows that you are on their team. You see how this works? I think it's a big scam. I think we're going to see this in a whole bunch of different places as the year rolls on. What do you think? See you in the next video.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says all options remain on the table for U.S. action in Iran.
We will be prepared to deliver whatever this president expects of the War Department.
Yes, that's right. All U.S. military options are on the table, which is terrible.
Remember, all these endings were because of Nick Shirley exposing fraud in Minnesota. But now he's trying to say that fraud didn't exist. It's a figment of our imagination.
You mentioned this fraud investigation and the reason that they're here. Is there anything you think, when you look back, you could have done differently to prevent them from showing up and doing what they're doing here?
No.
Doing what they're doing, they're exposing fraud. What do you mean? Doing what they're doing? How dare they expose us to frauding the American people?
Doing here?
No, they were coming anyway. It was all make believe that we'd been at it. Every state had this, and look, I do think there has to be accountability in this. No one in state government was implicated.
But the thing is, The fraud has been occurring for the last 10 years. Like, you had major people being arrested, and then fraud centers being shut down at the same address. The same owner shuts it down and rebuilds another one, which just relabels it a different name. You know it's been occurring, but now you're trying to gaslight us and say, oh, it was just make-believe.
No one in state government was implicated. This happens all over. People did this. We got it.
People did this. Some people did things. That's exactly what he's trying to say.
We got it caught. We put him in jail or whatever.
You mentioned this.
No, they got right back out. The crazy part is now Dr. Oz is out there in California, and I can speak to this stuff firsthand because it's like I recognize the intersections he's at. He's finding similar, if not worse, fraud in California, in the Los Angeles area, and we've always assumed this because how many strip malls can be selling rugs, top to bottom rugs, and cell phone repair shops? How can you have 20 of them on one strip? And he's finally discovering it.
So you can see these are medical buildings. They've got Cyrillic writing, Russian, Armenian writing. Both sides, there's
everything.
Lots of action.
They're all medical facilities, and you never see them. Yeah, Produce Meat and Deli. Oh, this is Sherman Way. Yeah, nobody's actually shopping here, guys. There's nobody there ever.
It seems. I don't know how many patients are getting care, but...
Whoa. What's that? I just built a budgeting app in Base 44.
Guys, Nina just built an app.
Impossible. Nina can't code. Interesting. Can it generate reports?
It can now.
Nice. So you're saying we can all build apps now?
Yeah.
I'm on lunch. I gotta make a call.
I'll be in my office. Just built an inventory tracker.
Protein calculator.
Book sharing app.
A workflow manager that
tracks who still owes for the group lunch.
Trash duty scheduling.
Since no one seems to care.
just built a
I just created a goal tracking system.
We built the same thing, didn't we?
Yep.
Can this thing manage contact?
Is the SOC 2 compliant?
I want to animate this graph.
Create a party planner.
Profesor de Español.
An inter-office dating app.
Are getting care, but in this 4-block area in Los Angeles, there are 42 hospices. So either there are a lot of people dying here, or you've got a fraudulent activity that is so good that everyone wants to get in on it. I'm in Van Nuys in Los Angeles, and this boarded up area above my head here is a big hospice center. There are apparently quite a few hospices around here, 42 within a 4-block radius. And these guys stole $16 million. Listen carefully. The main guy went to jail for 2 years for stealing $16 million.
How many people would trade that? Yeah, which is a good trade-off. How many people would say 2 years of your life going, like, what is it? A jail sentence isn't like going overseas and fighting in combat. But how many people would trade 2 years of their life for $16 million? A very, very scary message to send.
Good trade-off for a lot of folks. And if you look at it, it's pretty in the script. There wasn't anyone really in there. They weren't doing any services. They just got an address.
I know this place. I know this place. I know. I've been here. There's a boba shop there, and it's super. I know exactly where this is. There's a boba shop here, and it's like there's a Vietnamese restaurant, and it's like I know what the rent will be around here. I know what the margins are. It 1,000,000% had to be money laundering because I was like, this place is disgusting. Oh my God.
Address they could claim was terrible. A hospice. And then they ran the business claiming people were at home getting services, which they really weren't. What we have learned is there's roughly $3.5 billion of fraud taking place here in Los Angeles in hospice and home care. It's run quite a bit of it by the Russian Armenian mafia. You notice the lettering and language behind me.
The one thing I'll say, and it's I feel comfortable sharing this information. No, actually I don't. Never mind. I'll just say I had some friends that worked at dispensaries, security dispensaries over there. And if you're not aware, Prop 64 essentially made pot legal in California. And you saw these dispensaries pop up. Most of them were not operating legally. They're all cash. They're selling it, so you driving by it seems legal, but they never get the permits. They just sell, and when they get arrested, they just pay the fines. They bail the people out, and that was just part of it. I had a buddy that worked at one of them. How do I say it? Because my buddy still lives over there. They are criminal enterprises. I'll just say that.
Is of that dialect. And it also highlights the fact that this is sort of an organized crime, mafia deal where you've got folks who are systemically recruited doctors to write false prescriptions.
Okay, and people plan to get
hundreds
arrested. They
of
put
doctors
money away for
participating.
that shit.
They've got,
Don't be
And that's the thing,
stupid.
it's like not even the healthcare thing with like that deli, those markets that there's nobody at and they look super dirty. They're just taking EBT payments and they're not selling them anything. You bought 2 crates of milk. I'm giving you 50% of the money that I'm giving you for milk because there's no services here, and we're taking 50% of it as well.
100,000 patients who they've tricked or paid to give them their beneficiary numbers so they can perpetuate the fraud. And then the criminals are just running the whole organization and quickly scurrying away when law enforcement does get around to prosecuting them. Unfortunately,
and then they prosecute them and nothing happens and they come back.
In California, there has not been a lot of attention on these problems. That's going to change.
Yes.
Good. The U.S. Attorney, the FBI, everyone's now focused on the fact that in this state, which has about $30 billion worth of home and community-based services, most of it might be fraudulent. Those are big numbers.
Car wash, I think car washes are actually legit because when you're in LA and everybody, there's so much like brake dust and soot everywhere. Your cars get filthy all the time. It's nothing but apartment complexes. So if you have, because people usually wash their cars in their driveway, but if you live in an apartment complex, there's no place to wash your car, especially if it's a self-serve location. You don't pay anybody. You just have your overhead is water and soap in the property. Those things are very profitable. I've known someone that had a job that I work with opened up a car wash and was able to open up other ones in other states. If you can find a great location for them, I don't think those are shady.
We're taking it seriously. The president's not going to tolerate
water
this
stores,
anymore.
probably. Yep. Yeah. So he's looking into it, but then you have Governor Gavin Newsom saying it's racist to say the Armenians are behind this. Like, what's this thing saying? Our office is reviewing reports that Dr. Mehmet Oz targeted the Armenian American community in SoCal, making racially charged claims of fraud outside Armenian-run businesses, including a popular bakery. What the fuck is he talking about? He was just showing us places where it's like, this place charged the government this much money. Given the historic sensitivities involved, we were taking these allegations seriously. Any and all acts of hate have no place in California. And here's the thing: is like if Mehmet Oz said, "Go out there and find the people of this culture and shout at them and yell at them because they're bad people," it's like, no, he's not saying that. But anybody, I'm telling you, fucking anybody that has lived in Los Angeles knows about that specific group and their fraud rings, like Koreans having restaurants and having hair salons and have Vietnamese and having nail salons. It's not racist to say Vietnamese people work in nail salons a lot because they're oftentimes affiliated with it. It's basically a joke to say, yeah, them and fraud, because I have a lot of Armo friends. They laugh about it. It's just part of it. Like, we know about it. But for him to get all uppity and say, this is a racist claim, he's not going after a law-abiding citizen. He's saying, hey, I found a couple instances of this being fraud. But for him to hide behind, that's a racist claim, lets me know Mehmet Oz is about to find boatloads of fraud. For him to automatically go to the race card, because I'll tell you right now, working in just like, even as like I hate being Tim Pool as a skateboarder, but working as a security guard, whenever you know you're talking to somebody and they immediately go from I'm innocent to you're being racist, lets you know they don't have a card to play, because they would say, hey, they're not fraud because we investigated them on this date. They're not fraud because we have safeguards in place to make sure they're not fraud. For him to automatically go, I know nothing about what Oz has found. I know nothing about the federal investigation into these companies, but it's already racist. It's kind of like what they're doing over in Minnesota. I almost said Minnesota, where they say if they call it racist off the get, they know they're just trying to distract you from getting into it because you are right on target. What do they say? If you're catching flack, it lets you know you're on target. That's exactly what's happening. Yep, there you go. Arrow saying the more flack, the closer you are to target. Exactly.
California is already paying back $1.6 billion that they previously charged to the federal government for healthcare services given to illegal immigrants.
Good.
But they have a much bigger fraud problem that hurts American citizens. So I've instructed Governor Newsom to produce within the next 3 weeks a comprehensive program integrity action plan to address major fraud in their healthcare system. I'm going to give you 3 examples of embarrassing fraud that Governor Newsom has been seemingly tolerating for years.
Now, he's proud of it because he went over to Davos to say, I'm proud we're giving healthcare to illegals. Saying that almost as if it's like a campaign promise. He's admitting it on one end, but when it's inconvenient, he's denying it.
First, California shares the problems that we are seeing in Minnesota with in-home supportive services. What are these? They include personal care like bathing or grooming, household tasks, cleaning and cooking, shopping, transportation. Now, these are tasks that your family could do for you.
And here's the thing is, these are tasks that people will see as like inalienable rights. Oh my God, your grandpa is super old and he needs help around the house. Why would you ever say no to giving grandpa extra services around the house? So they say, pull at your heartstrings, say, we want to provide these services with your tax dollars. I don't mind providing an old grandpa that has no family with someone to help change his bedpan. Of course I want to help that. So, okay, we can give tax dollars to that. It starts getting defrauded. And once you say, hey, I caught this fraud, we should stop. We should cut that off. It's like, are you a racist? Are you trying to harm grandpa? How dare you? That's how they push you away and get you to not investigate this stuff.
But having the government pay has generated some significant cash for unethical people. California spending for these services increased from $8 to $28 billion over the past decade.
Kind of how in the Somalian community, autism went up by like 1,800% over the last couple of years.
Why should the federal taxpayer spend 250% more money on California?
Why should the taxpayers be paying for anybody's health care in the beginning? That's like when Tim Walz said, Trump wants to give you cash so you can pay for health care. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. We should take the money, hold it for you, and buy it for you, buy you the health care when you need it. Speaking like he thinks he's literally our pimp.
Which is already an affluent state. And this program is still growing by double digits annually. Second, in 2024 alone, spending for home health care in California increased by more than 21%, representing the largest growth rate for any major health category nationwide.
Because they know that's a cash cow. Healthcare is a thing that people don't mind spending for, so they just keep on knocking it up and wait for someone to catch them.
The number of home health agencies in California almost doubled between 2019 and 24. LA County alone is accounting for $1.4 billion, representing almost 9% of total fee-for-service home health spending for the entire country, though it just has 2% of the national enrollment. That's 5 times more than expected LA Home Health. I don't get it. They're taking home money that other agencies nationwide could use, so fewer Americans can get access to these vital
Americans, not immigrants, but Americans. That's the important aspect of this.
Services. LA County's corrupt practices are hurting innocent seniors outside of Southern California.
And the insane part is how much fraud they're committing and how terrible the city looks and how they're always running a deficit. How you guys are defrauding the American people of billions of dollars and still being in debt.
Yeah. Finally, LA County should be ashamed of the 2022 California State Auditor Report showing that their number of hospice agencies increased by 1,500%.
How many old people do we have?
Yes, you heard that right. 1,500%. That exceeds the 40% increase in the senior population during that same period. How can you defend a 7-fold increase in hospice, especially since so many of these charlatans report 100% survival for...
That's the thing is I think I saw a police officer. There was like a podcast where someone was saying in Minnesota, how many heart attacks from the Somalian community do you know? And they started like sharing that within cops. They're like, wait, we never respond to like at-home deaths for the Somalian community. And the suspicion is that when they pass away, unfortunately, they just say, okay, pretend they're alive, continue to collect the checks, which is horrendous. But also they're like, what is the community doing with the bodies? Like how many 140-year-old Somalians can live over there in that community without anybody checking in on like, why is that a thing? And you're starting to see the same thing over here. There's 1,500% more old people, but they all live forever. Either it's fraud or they have the secret to eternal life. Either way, we should investigate this. But for Gavin Newsom to say that's racist for you to say either Los Angeles County figured out a way to defraud the American people or they figured out a way to have achieving immortality. We need to figure this out, guys.
Supposedly terminally ill patients. I'm hearing horror stories from seniors duped by these fraudsters because California is not stopping these criminals. Governor Newsom, the clock is ticking.
They don't stop the fraud because they need the fraud to survive. If all of a sudden you cut out $20 billion of federal dollars coming into their community to pay for this healthcare services, everything collapses. Because I remember, how do I make this anonymous? I'm going to change the business. Actually, how do I change the business? I had a normal friend, Armenian friend, and they ran a luxury company. They sold a luxury product that the community is well known for wanting to purchase and all enjoy. Like you always see them with this product. Okay, I'm not trying to put anybody out, but the idea is they're also from the home country. They come over here and they sell a lot of this product, this luxury product, to other members of the community. Now, even though his company, top to bottom, legit, paying taxes as physical inventory, he's selling this. I wonder, people have started to guess in chat. He's selling this product. But the thing is, though, is if it wasn't for the fraud also in the community, he would never have the clientele to buy this very, very expensive service that he provides. So it's like, is he a fraudster? Absolutely not. He's a legit businessman. But if it wasn't for the rampant fraud in that community, he's under. So it's like you have to infuse the money, bolster the economy. But if all of a sudden you shut down all those fraud services, my buddy's brother, he also loses his business. So it's like, yeah, California's entire economy would collapse if you took away the fraudsters. He's finding more of it. I wonder if this is the same thing he's talking about here.
Immigrants. So Gavin Newsom was giving us a hard time for threatening the health insurance of illegal immigrants. Just to be very transparent, if you're on Medicare, you don't get free dental, you don't get free vision. You do if you're an illegal immigrant in California.
This is the infuriating. So many people don't know this. Illegals get more health care benefits than Americans. They just don't want to accept it, even though Governor Gavin Newsom goes to Davos to brag about it.
So you got taxpayers in New Mexico, right, which is a blue state but a poor state, paying extra tax dollars to the federal government that are recycled back into LA to deal with the fraud that I'm talking about. So illegal immigrants, he's mad. We're horrible people. We're Republicans. You have no conscience. You have no heart. As soon as we made it clear we were no longer going to pay for illegal immigrants in California, what did he do? He took them off Medi-Cal. Now, he didn't take them off. He took them up on the federal side. So in theory, only emergency services are going to get paid for illegal immigrants in California, which is a national law.
And it's reasonable.
Reasonable. Now, we want babies delivered, car accident victims.
Yeah, of course.
Of course get health care, but not elective hernia surgery.
That's the thing is when they say health care, they want to provide it because most people will vote yes for it. It's like when you have a ballot. I was looking at my California ballot the other day, and it was like, do you want to provide a new school something for the students? And it seems good, but it's like if you actually look at the text of the bill they're asking you to vote on, it was financing all this other batshit insane liberal nonsense. And I was like, yeah, see, it's always trying to say, give us health care because, you know, you don't want the baby to lose their life after a car accident, but it's like it also funds rampant fraud.
Augment Code just outperformed 6 of the top AI code review tools on a public benchmark. These are results from Greptal's AI code review benchmark. 50 pull requests from production code bases like Sentry, Grafana, Cal.com, Keycloak, and Discourse. Each PR has ground truth issues validated by humans. Tools get points for catching real bugs and lose points for noise. Precision here means when a tool flags something, is it actually a bug? And recall means out of all the bugs, how many did it actually catch? Only Augment achieved high recall and high precision. 65% precision and 55% recall. Codex actually has higher precision at 68%, but look at the recall, 29%. It stays quiet to avoid false positives, but misses most of the real bugs. Cursor Bugbot, 60% precision, 41% recall, solid but lower coverage. Greptile has a solid balance of exactly 45% in both precision and recall. Claude Code actually went the other direction, 51% recall but only 23% precision. It finds issues but most of the comments are noise. CodeRabbit has 36% precision and 43% recall. GitHub Copilot has 20% precision and 34% recall. Let's dive into a real example and show the comparison between Augment Code and the rest. Here's one from the Sentry repo. A pull request reorganizing incident creation logic introduced a subtle bug. A developer modified the local config dictionary, but returned the original object, resulting in the code change getting silently dropped. Augment flagged this exact issue and explained that the return value ignored the modification. Cursor Bugbot returned a green checkmark saying no bugs are found, and Greptile gave it 5 out of 5 confidence, saying it was safe.
Cataracts, you know, you have to be an American citizen who paid into the system to get these. So anyway, so we deal with this. Gavin says we're only going to pay for illegal immigrants through our own state-based system. We've audited him now. This data is coming out this week. We have now found over $1.5 billion of money spent wrongly. We've audited it. They're not even arguing. $1.5 billion from that California charged the federal government for illegal immigrants that they're not allowed to pay charges for. They have to pay for it themselves.
I remember CNN was saying, but it's against federal law to give them health care. It's like, yeah, how many federal laws have they been violating? It's not something new for them.
He's not happy, but they're paying us because they know we're right. So you're going to see something happen very interesting in California. As soon as the money is being paid by California government officials, they're going to start getting more serious about this. And that's why it's so important for us to say, we're not into this anymore. I'm not going to let taxpayers in Alabama and Mississippi, New Mexico, our poorest states pay
and get less.
Pay for votes for Gavin Newsom. That's what they're doing.
Fourth largest economy in the world, and they get less.
It's sad that that's where we're at right now, but that's pretty much why he has to go immediately to racism. They're afraid because their entire system is just based on rampant immigration, pay for them, give them more benefits than the American taxpayer, and then they can essentially own cheap votes. Because if you looked at the most recent polling data saying who's shifting left, who's shifting right, who supports them, Asians, blacks, Hispanics, they're not 100% in favor. They're not like for the Republicans, but at this point in time, it's like if African Americans were 70% for Democrats, they're now 50%. They're losing in every single performance metric except for illegal immigrants. Because with Hispanic voters, it was something like 14% plus Democrats, and now it's like 5% plus Democrats. Like American citizens are tired of being used as tax cattle or fraud, essentially, and they're starting to lose ground. So they just want those cheap votes. So.
Choose from thousands of realistic voices to use in your content. Change the way you record podcasts, voiceovers, and branded content with the #1 AI-powered voice.
News for Iran's leaders, who are grasping at their last straws of power, trying to preserve their despotic regime as the country around them collapses under their leadership. Meanwhile, the president is pondering every conceivable use of force while backing the protesters. And as you're about to see, the people of Iran won't have long to wait.
As the U.S. carrier group arrived in the Middle East this week, President Trump boasted about its capabilities.
We have a lot of very big, very powerful ships sailing to Iran right now, and it would be great if we didn't have to use them.
White House now reportedly considering a range of possible military targets. This comes after the threat from Trump yesterday for Iran to make a deal to limit its missile program, put an end to its nuclear program, cut off aid to its proxies, or face an even bigger attack than the U.S. helped unleash on Iran last year.
The buildup comes as Iran reportedly received a new shipment of 1,000 drones and prepares for the possibility of direct confrontation.
But some Iranians tracking the buildup of U.S. military forces tell us they want him to use them, and fast.
If I am Mr. Donald Trump, I don't give even one more day to Islamic Republic to recover.
Iran has never been weaker than they are right now in their entire history, politically, economically, and militarily. And we have an opportunity here to really set some conditions for the eventual regime collapse. And that's why the military option is on the table.
This should scare every regime leader and dictator on the entire planet. And what nobody's talking about is everything happening in Iran today, including its imminent collapse, are due to two recent events America's enemies prophesied were a mistake. And those would be the destruction of Iran's nuclear program, which disabled the regime's ability to project power and threaten every nation on Earth, and would have allowed the supreme leader to fortify his nation against external meddling, just like North Korea. But it's the second event that has triggered the impending collapse of Iran's dictatorship and hyperinflation nightmare, and that would be the toppling of the regime in Venezuela, which is on the other side of the planet from Iran, but was buddy-buddy with that regime, helping them evade U.S. sanctions, while also allowing Iran to use parts of Venezuelan territory to train militant groups like Hezbollah, while they laundered money through the trade of illegal oil, which reveals the real reason the United States may soon take action in Iran. The people of this country have been struggling for decades to try and regain their freedom, and at the exact same time, Iran's existence with its current regime does nothing but help empower our enemies. And many on the streets of Iran right now are saying this is the final battle and that the time is now, but time for what exactly? All eyes are on the United States, which is moving carrier battle group after battle group into the Persian Gulf and surrounding waters. And with President Trump making intentionally conflicting statements about what will happen next, Iran's leaders have no idea what's going on. They don't know if it's still possible to achieve peace through some sort of negotiation, or if the writing is already on the wall and it's time for them to pack their bags and flee, which they should have gathered from the following conversation.
We're having to rebuild how our enemies perceive us. And when President Trump said, we're not getting a nuclear, Iran, you won't have a nuclear bomb, he meant it. And we sent those B-2s halfway around the world, and they never noticed. When he said, we're securing the border, the military was proud to do their part alongside Homeland Security to do that. Same thing with Iran right now.
Same thing with Iran right now. Did you hear that? I'm sure the leaders over there did, and that's why they've been living out of bunkers for weeks, hiding from their own people and from the United States. America's made it pretty clear we're not going to tolerate countries who threaten us and supply our enemies, which Iran was doing from our very doorstep, helping prop up Venezuela, Cuba, Russia, and China as part of a sanctions-evading cartel meant to evade the peaceful transition of power sanctions are supposed to help bring about. But remember the idea of conflicting statements? Watch this and tell me how confused the Iranians must be right now.
They have all the options to make a deal. They should not pursue nuclear capabilities. We will be prepared to deliver whatever this president expects of the War Department, just like we did this month. No other military in the world could have executed the most sophisticated, powerful raid, not just in American history, I would say in world history.
He's talking about the raid in Venezuela, but he starts off the statement by saying they've got everything they need to make a deal, but the War Department's going to deliver whatever the president expects of us, and War Departments don't deliver deals. They deliver something else. And that's what the entire world is waiting for right now. Everyone's watching these ships approach the Middle East from multiple directions, massive carrier battle groups. No other country on earth has the power to stand against. And that's the entire plan. The world is confused. They see the same thing happening here that happened in Venezuela just a few weeks ago. They hear Trump saying on one hand, the Iranians can make a deal. We hope we don't have to use any of the assets we're bringing into the region. But then why are those assets there? And is Iran even able to make a deal at this point?
Negotiations would have made sense a year ago, certainly 5 years ago. Negotiations to do what? No enrichment of uranium, limit the missile program, and number 3, no support to proxies. If we got a deal like that in those days, that all would have made some sense, because then we could have waited out and seen what happened. If we go and make a deal with the Iranians today, what are we really doing? We're extending the life of the regime. We're extending it. We're throwing them a lifeline. And it's a gut punch to the protesters. Protesters don't care about the nuclear deal. They care, what are they really in the street willing to die for? We think now tens of thousands of...
That's the whole idea here. Any deal at this point just preserves an unacceptable status quo for not just Iran and its people and the United States, but for the entire world. Why do we need a bunch of countries that are evading sanctions on their corrupt governments that do nothing but help prop each other up and contribute to harm in the world in some capacity. I'm talking about Russia. I'm talking about Cuba. I'm talking about Venezuela. I'm talking about Iran. What deal could we possibly make right now that would be good for anybody? And could that deal even be trusted? But before we continue, today's video is sponsored by Rumble Wallet, which you need to know about because they can freeze your accounts, shut off your credit cards, and lock you out of your own money overnight. Banks don't protect you, they control you, which is why real financial freedom starts with ownership. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a custodial wallet built for people who refuse to give up control. With Rumble Wallet, you don't just buy digital currency like Bitcoin and Tether, you can own Tether Gold, real gold on the blockchain. Through Tether Gold, you get direct ownership of actual gold. We're talking physical gold bars, each one fully allocated, verifiable by serial number, purity, and weight. This isn't paper gold, this isn't an IOU, this is real gold without bank vaults, storage fees, or gatekeepers. You can buy, sell, or move it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when traditional financial markets are closed. And if you want, Tether Gold can even be redeemed for physical gold. That's power. And when you support creators on Rumble, you can tip them peer-to-peer, completely outside the banking system using Rumble Wallet. No permissions, no middlemen, no cancel button. This wallet is yours forever. Check it out right here at wallet.rumble.com. Link also in the video description.
As the U.S. carrier group arrived in the Middle East this week, President Trump boasted about its capabilities.
We have a lot of very big, very powerful ships sailing to Iran right now, and it would be great if we didn't have to use them.
But some Iranians tracking the buildup of U.S. military forces tell us they want him to use them and fast.
If I am Mr. Donald Trump, I don't give even one more day to Islamic Republic to recover.
Because if that happens, what are they going to do? If they don't give up their power, we've seen how this government and these leaders treat their people and interact on the world stage for 50 years. There's no deal that they're going to make that is going to change half a century of corrupt criminal behavior that destabilizes the world and destabilizes the Middle East. If you want peace in the Middle East, you got to do something about these radical regimes that go after their own people and the countries around them. And remember the event that brought all of this about? It was the bombing of Iran's nuclear program. Just 1 year ago, everyone was told what a mistake this was. Oh, how this was such a bad idea, how this was going to lead to some wide regional conflict and even strengthen the regime if we were to do anything. No, it's causing that regime to collapse. You know why North Korea doesn't collapse? Because they are in the position this regime was hoping to get to. This regime was hoping to get to a point where they had nuclear weapons and nobody could threaten them because of the concept of mutually assured destruction. But no, that's not on the table with Iran right now. If they were able to get a nuclear weapon, they would basically solidify their corrupt government just like North Korea has. There would be nothing the world could do. The world would be at their mercy. But now Iran is at the mercy of people who want to see big changes over there.
So we're not sharing their real names to protect their families in Iran. 4 are now outside the country. 1 is still inside. All say they attended the biggest protests on Thursday, January 8th and Friday, January 9th, which took place across nearly 200 cities in all 31 provinces, including the capital of Tehran, where Farhad was back home visiting his parents.
Wow.
As soon as we exit from the building, we could see the crowd of people. I have not seen it in Tehran before.
That's
I was
insane.
seeing the hope in my father's face.
This can't go on forever. If the United States makes some sort of deal with the Iranian regime that solidifies them and props them up, which is what any deal will do, this all ends. And the protesters, everything they've been struggling for, it will all have been a complete waste. At the exact same time, what is the Trump administration asking Iran to give up? What are they asking them to give up? They're asking them to give up, these leaders. They're saying, guys, stop doing everything that will preserve your power, which basically puts them between a rock and a hard place. They got the protesters on one side, and on the other side, they've got conditions for a deal, which will mean they've got to pack their bags and flee if they agree to it. You see, that's why they're saying they're going to dig in their heels. But if they do that, as you're about to see, something could happen. And it could happen quickly and swiftly, which they don't want.
To try to contain the malign influences of Iran have been there for some time. moving what we call now the Armada over, I think actually expands the president's option set.
Yes, it does.
It deals with any regional allies that might talk about not being permissive with airspace or other kind of movement of forces, so that the president can have his maximum pressure, get at the ghost fleet that hits the energy markets that have helped Iran bust sanctions in the past.
Yep.
It affects China a lot since it's a primary customer of Iranian oil. And so it helps increase the pressure to bring them to the negotiating table.
Look at this map right here. Up north, you've got carriers. Down south, you got some carriers. There is no way for Iran's ghost fleet of tankers to do anything. So the country can't do business. Business is over. They've already got big problems over there with their currency collapsing. People are very upset. That's why folks are protesting. That's why the regime is weak. If they don't have money, they cannot solidify themselves. They cannot prop themselves up. They're going to collapse. And as we've already seen, the deal, as it's called, just gets worse all the time for the Iranians, as it should. Something the people of that country desperately want. They don't want a good deal. They don't want this regime to stick around for any longer than it has already. But you've got to understand something here. These carriers are everything. Why do you think Russia is fighting a war in Ukraine, trying to expand its territory and create a larger buffer zone between where Moscow is and where the rest of Europe is? They want to move the battle lines. That's what Russia's trying to do. They're afraid. They want to create as much mayhem and havoc as they can. That's why they invaded Ukraine. But with carriers, the battle lines come to where you are. This is a capability that the United States has that no other country has at all. You could be in your country, you've got a vast ocean out in front of you, and then boom, a carrier battle group shows up, and you've got battle lines right there that you never even expected and can't really do a whole lot against. But what about this idea of retaliation? Does the United States have anything to fear?
Listen, you have to understand how weak this regime really is, politically, economically, and militarily.
Okay.
We have moved these assets into the region for two reasons. One is to be properly defended in the event of retaliation.
Okay.
And there will be retaliation. So we want to have our air defense systems, both maritime and land-based and air-based, to defend against that, much as it took place post Midnight Hammer, the decisive strike against the nuclear enterprise.
And the interesting thing about this comparison here is, what did everyone say? Oh, if Trump intervenes in Iran, that's the end of the Middle East. The place is over. And they're almost saying the exact same thing now. All of the people that want to see the Iranian regime propped up, I'm talking everybody from countries like Russia to people in America who hold elected positions across the country who just want to see Trump fail and just want to stick up for our enemies and prop them up because they secretly don't like our country. Everybody is hating on the idea of something happening here, saying there's going to be some massive conflict. But as you're about to see, the general doesn't think that's going to happen for a very specific reason.
His offensive capability, not only to take leaders down and those repressing the regime and maybe export distribution of oil to truly decimate their oil program, which is they're dependent on China, obviously, to buy that. And everything we can do to interfere with that is good news. But it's also going to be a major focus on ballistic missiles and short-range missiles, because that's what would hit our bases, and that's certainly what would hit Israel. So that's the reason for these assets being brought into the region. Better defense and improved offensive capability. But the idea that this is going to be a regional war, people who are saying that don't really understand the facts. And to think that it's going to expand beyond the region don't understand the facts. This regime is a mere shadow of its former self. Do they still have capability in ballistic missiles? Yeah. They have a lot of bluster and a lot of rhetoric. And you can't pay much attention to it because they've been doing that for these 45 plus years.
And what do they say took place after this Operation Midnight Hammer? The regime says that they responded with strength, that they struck back at the United States and taught them a thing or two, and that they told the world that they wouldn't be bullied. But that strike a year ago is basically why they're collapsing right now. That strike eliminated their ability to prop themselves up and solidify their sanctuary fortress for evil behavior against any attempt to overthrow it from protesters inside the country and from external meddling. And we didn't see a regional war after that, even though they retaliated, and they're not where they were a year ago. And a year ago, they failed to do the thing that everybody's saying the United States should be terrified of.
When President Trump said, we're not getting a nuclear Iran, you won't have a nuclear bomb, he meant it. And we sent those B-2s halfway around the world, and they never noticed.
They never noticed.
Adding to the pressure on Tehran, the European Union has now designated Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization.
In Iran, horrific crackdown on protesters has come at a heavy human cost. The EU already has sweeping sanctions in place, and today ministers agreed to designate Iran Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization.
The designation gives EU governments the authority to use their strongest counterterrorism measures far beyond standard sanctions.
So some people are saying this recent designation, which for some reason happened in 2026 rather than decades ago when it should have, will give the United States legal international justification for something happening in the very near future. And they are saying that this is just another piece and a puzzle that is lining up to look like Iran's leaders are in a no-win situation. Remember, on the one side, the regime has United States carriers above them and below them. They've got their people inside the country who are fighting to topple this regime. And the only way out of this situation for them is to agree to things that are going to strengthen their people and bring freedom back to their people and eliminate the power structure that's been in place there and has been oppressing them for decades. And let's think about Iran's military for a second. You've got the boots on the ground troops, you've got the pilots, you've got the people manning the ballistic missile centers, which might not even survive a decisive blow launched by the Trump administration. If something happens to the leaders of this country, the despots that are in charge there, and the people that make up the military look out on the streets and they see their neighbors, their relatives, their family members fighting for the freedom of this country, trying to retake it in a way that allows the people of that country to prosper for the first time in decades. What are they going to say to themselves? If the leaders are gone and the leaders pay them and pay their bills and take care of them and they jump ship and these troops are left in a country that is full of protesters who want to see change, are they really going to stand up to that? Are they really going to have the heart to go against their own countrymen when their leaders have abandoned them or aren't around anymore to make decisions for some reason or another? What do you think about all this? Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
I grew up with the movie Holes, and I just wanted to know, you've done a lot of movies, a lot of serious movies, a lot of really cool movies. Did you like doing Holes?
No.
Or did you just do it because you were a kid?
No, Holes was horrible. Holes was, we were in this place called Ridgecrest, California. We were all really young, we were all excited, you know. I had just come off some TV shows, my first like real job. It's like Disney Channel took me, we won an Emmy on this channel thing, and then it became like a big deal because they hadn't had any of those. And they pushed us over to the main Disney, but I had built like a family, like a tribe of people I was kicking it with. They all disappeared, so now you got this new tribe. And then Jon Voight's like walking around in character, and I'd never been around somebody like that who doesn't break, you know? And he's spitting these sunflower seeds around, he's like mean, and I'm going, nah, this isn't gonna work. And my dad isn't, you know, my dad is my dad, and he doesn't know nothing about that either. So him and my dad had to have a whole thing. Oh boy, and then, because my dad's not diplomatic, you know, at this point he's only 4 years out of prison, and Jon Voight's playing these games, my dad don't care, you know. So then John had to check my dad, which was healthy for my family. A lot went on there, but also my dad was hitting on Sigourney Weaver all the time, and That didn't work. And then it was 150 degrees in the hole. So you could only be in the hole for 5-minute windows per the Screen Actors Guild. So they had a rep sitting out there with a stopwatch. So you would do these takes and they'd be like, 5 minutes, and we'd have to jump out the hole even if we were in the middle of the take. And there was one time we were and this will be the last thing I say, I know you got the countdown. No. Okay, cool. There was this kid who used to have a toothpick in his mouth all the time, kid Jake. And, we all had like these half trailers, and I was in the half trailer with him. And I was sitting in my trailer one time with my dad, we're playing gin rummy, and I hear this huge bang, and the whole thing rocks. And I walk outside, and this dude has flown out of his side of the trailer, and the whole wall of the trailer has blown out. He's not just out of it, the whole wall is blown out of the trailer. And it's because the refrigeration unit, it was so hot in Ridgecrest that the there was like an oxygen bomb that went off in this refrigerator and blew this kid across the desert. So it was like a pretty intense shoot. I don't know if you could shoot something like that on like Netflix now, you know? They wouldn't let you put a kid. There's stuff you could do then you can't do now, you know?
I grew up with the movie Holes,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to know, you've done a lot of movies, a lot of serious movies, a lot of really cool movies. Did you like doing Holes?
No.
Or did you just do it because you were a kid?
No, Holes was horrible. We were in this place called Ridgecrest, California. We were all really young, we were all excited, you know. I had just come off some TV shows, my first like real job. It's like Disney Channel we won an Emmy on this channel thing, and then it became like a big deal because they hadn't had any of those. And they pushed us over to the main Disney, but I had built like a family, like a tribe of people I was kicking it with. They all disappeared, so now you got this new tribe. And then John Voight's like walking around in character, and I'd never been around somebody like that who doesn't break, you know? And he's spitting these sunflower seeds around, he's like mean, and I'm going, nah, this isn't gonna work. And my dad is my dad, and he doesn't know nothing about that either. So him and my dad had to have a whole thing. Oh boy, and then, because my dad's not diplomatic, you know, at this point he's only 4 years out of prison, and John Voight's playing these games, my dad don't care, you know. So then John had to check my dad, which was healthy for my family.
Don't you just love that platinum chip? Buzzes with power and possibilities, doesn't it? You blew it up. That's just funny because that army seems like the secret weapon that was the whole point of, I really admire how you stack the odds against yourself. Yeah, make things challenging. It's great, really, yeah. So, anyway, wow! You really blew up all those Securitrons at the fort. Great! No problem. I can't get over how brave you were to destroy all those Securitrons at the fort. You know, it's just gonna make everything so much more... challenging. Yeah! Challenging. Don't you just love that platinum chip? Buzzes with power and possibilities, doesn't it?
Thanks for calling Discover. This is Diane. Hi, I just received my new Discover card. It says cashback on every purchase. What's cashback? It's new. Buy what you need.
And after approximately 2 years, it's time we discussed one of the older papers that actually made an incredible discovery. A discovery that's been 50 years in the making. And that's because for decades, astronomers have predicted the existence of some of the most bizarre massive objects in the universe. Lonely supermassive black holes traveling across space without much fanfare and without making themselves too obvious. And that's because these black holes escaped their home galaxies and became wandering black holes, moving through the darkness of intergalactic space for billions and billions of years. And theoretically, quite a few of these black holes should be all over the place. And that's because they're usually produced as a result of various galactic interactions, and especially galactic mergers. But the thing is, until recently, we had absolutely no proof of their existence. Even though there have been some clues here and there, nothing definitive has been discovered until the last few years. And well, hello wonderful person, this is Anton. In this video we're going to discuss a definitive confirmation of at least one such supermassive black hole that you can kind of see in this image next to me. And that's because after 2 years of debates, we finally have definitive proof that this seems to be the first ever runaway supermassive black hole, currently zipping through space at nearly 1,000 km per second, and producing the contrail you see in this image. This is now referred to as RBH1, Runaway Black Hole 1. But this is not the first time we've discussed this particular image, because originally this was discovered back in 2023 completely by accident. And so here, while looking at archival Hubble images, specifically focusing on a galaxy known as RCP-28, scientists behind that 2013 study, the link for which you can find in the description, discovered this really unusual line, and a very thin line, kind of resembling a flying bullet. And initially this was assumed to be maybe some kind of a camera artifact, or even some kind of a cosmic ray just passing through the camera lens, mostly because it looked so bizarre. But the additional observations and additional confirmations showed us that this was a real object and contained a lot of gas and relatively young stars stretching approximately 200,000 light years. That's about twice as big as the Milky Way galaxy. And so the first explanation here was, of course, that this was a supermassive black hole that escaped the galaxy nearby and that was basically forming something like this, a contrail of stars. But not everybody accepted this, and the initial explanation was not particularly satisfactory. And so almost right away we had a counter-proposition and actually very good counter-evidence. It was from the study you can find in the description, and well, as you can see from the title, they claim to have solved the mystery. And that's because this was now explained as an extremely thin disk galaxy that we were just observing from the side. In other words, instead of looking at this face-on, you were just seeing the side. And here they actually provided quite a few additional examples of extremely similar galaxies that basically produce very similar shapes. And so what was initially thought to be a wake from the runaway supermassive black hole was now suddenly explained as an edge-on view of a bulgeless galaxy, with one of the best examples that looked exactly like this being IC 5249, a galaxy that also looks just like a single line. And that did actually make more sense because the object in this case was extremely large, once again 200,000 light years, which would be similar to a typical galaxy and would not require an explanation involving some kind of a very bizarre contrail. Something that, by the way, we've never seen before. We've actually never seen anything like this after decades and decades of research. But that's where this new research from just a few weeks ago comes in, because the original team, led by Peter Van Dolkum, did not agree with this explanation and wanted to confirm that this was indeed a runaway black hole and not a galaxy. But to confirm this, they needed one particular piece of evidence. They needed to find some kind of a shock wave that's actually being formed by the black hole as it moves across the intergalactic space. In other words, they needed a smoking gun to prove that this object was moving at a high velocity and was producing a lot of additional interactions. And for this, they used the James Webb Space Telescope. And so here, by using JWST's near-infrared spectrum observations, they looked at the tip of this 200,000 light-year long object. And they really wanted to find the bull shock. Basically a wave of compressed gas created when an object moves much faster than the speed of sound through a particular medium. This is of course something we usually see in the atmosphere and in the ocean when the objects move really fast. And well, to everyone's surprise, JWST data provided the proof. Here scientists discovered a very sharp change in velocity right at the tip of the object. Specifically a jump of about 600 km per second over an extremely small distance. This kind of a steep velocity gradient is exactly what you would expect from a typical bull shock. And that of course was an extremely important piece of evidence. It provided empirical validation that these supermassive giants can indeed escape their galaxies and then travel at extremely high velocities, disturbing the intergalactic gas, and even causing star formation in their wake. Which is exactly what seems to be this contrail that's left behind. And so here, a massive black hole approximately 20 million solar masses seems to plow through this intergalactic gas so fast and creates so much pressure that it then leaves behind a very long line of newly formed stars, which seems to be the main explanation for this very strange line. And though obviously a bulgeless galaxy would be a much more convenient explanation, right now this would not explain the shockwave. With the next natural question being, okay, so how exactly did this happen? How would such a massive black hole leave such a small galaxy? And well, according to all of the research we have, there seem to be two main ways. Both of them involve a lot of galactic interactions. First, we have what's known as the three-body slingshot. Basically, imagine two supermassive black holes orbiting each other after galaxies merge, and then there's suddenly a third galaxy that delivers a third black hole. And these three massive objects then start to orbit and create a gravitational instability. That's of course the famous three-body problem. And one of the solutions to this problem is that one of them gets kicked out, and usually with a lot of energy. Normally this involves the lightest of the black holes. That of course implies that the other two are much more massive. Alternatively, there's also the idea known as gravitational wave recoil. This is what happens when two black holes merge, and as a result they also release gravitational waves. And sometimes during the merger, there's a kind of a bias toward one direction, where a lot more waves are emitted much stronger in a certain direction, which can then give this newly merged black hole a tremendous kick in the opposite direction, which can then create these supermassive runaways. And, well, based on the initial analysis here, it looks like this black hole has only been traveling for approximately 70 million years, ever since it's left its host. It's not clear exactly what formed it, but we can kind of see the host in one of these images. And this is of course a really important discovery for astrophysics. It basically confirms that sometimes some galaxies can indeed lose their own black holes, with these black holes then traveling across and forming these bizarre star structures that don't actually qualify as clusters or galaxies, but instead are basically just a line of stars left behind when the black hole passed. And that also explains why we've seen some galaxies, including the nearby Triangulum galaxy, that seem to have no central black hole. In other words, we now have an explanation for why this galaxy seems to have nothing in the center. But this also raises the question of, so what happens to them afterwards? And moreover, what happens to all of these stars and all of these additional structures formed by this fast-moving object? Because in this case, the wake itself is also fascinating. Here, as the black hole travels, it doesn't just consume everything in its path, but instead, because it's moving so fast, once again almost 1000 kilometers per second, and by the way, if you were to move at this speed, you would get from Earth to Moon in just 14 minutes. Here, this extremely fast motion actually compresses the gas, triggering a massive star-forming region in its wake, which most likely results in a lot of hot blue stars. And so in some sense, this invisible monster is actually creating new life in its wake. And that means that there's probably so much to discover here, because this is the first such object we've ever seen. But it's not the first unusual supermassive black hole discovered in the last few years. Because not so long ago we've also talked about the cosmic owl. A very strange structure containing two galaxies, but three supermassive black holes. And one of them is right in the middle. And though at first it was believed to be a runaway black hole as well, last year scientists confirmed that this is actually the first ever baby supermassive black hole that seems to have formed right there as a result of massive amounts of collapsing gas, because these two galaxies are merging. And well, except for these two cases, everything else so far has been kind of ambiguous, and there's just not enough evidence. But in just the last year or so, we have now confirmed two super exciting objects, or I guess very exciting supermassive black holes, that though have been predicted to exist, have never been physically observed, and have now proved a lot of different theories. Which means that now scientists are going to focus on trying to find more of these similar objects, even though they're kind of difficult to see because, at least in this case, this is just an extremely thin object that's very difficult to identify. But scientists are now pinning their hopes on the upcoming wide field surveys, such as the ones by the Euclid telescope and the Nancy Grace Roman telescope. These telescopes are designed to scan a large portion of the night skies and could definitely help us identify a lot of these runaway monsters. But at least for now, this is a super exciting discovery. The first confirmed runaway supermassive black hole in the history of astronomy. And though it might sound a little bit scary, especially one of these objects could be slowly moving toward us, Honestly, that's extremely unlikely, so there's obviously nothing to worry about. Anyway, once there are some additional discoveries, we'll come back and discuss this more in some of the future videos. Until then, thank you for watching, subscribe, come back tomorrow to learn something else, support this channel on Patreon where you can find additional videos without any ads and can DM me directly, or by joining a channel membership that grants you early access and a few more things. You can also support this channel by buying the Wonderful Person t-shirt in the description below. Stay wonderful, I'll see you tomorrow, and as always, bye bye.
Come here, little forest puppy. Come here. Whoa. Where'd those legs come from, forest puppy? Can I see you? Can I see you? Can see your eyes? Let me get your eyes in the sun. Let me get your eyes in the sun. Oh, there we go. Look at those pretty eyes. Look at your pretty eyes. How are you doing? Where'd those deer legs come from? Huh? Oh, area hunters taking care of you? Yes, they are. Accidentally fell off a truck, didn't they? Come on, let's go for a walk. Come here, little forest puppy. Come here. Whoa. Where'd those legs come from, forest puppy? Can I see you? Can I see you? Can see your eyes? Let me get your eyes in the sun. Let me get your eyes in the sun. Oh, there we go. Look at those pretty eyes. Look at your pretty eyes. How are you doing? Where'd those deer?
We started with a t-shirt, then we had a shirt, then we got a robe. It's 3 layers.
The attention to detail in the Lord of the Rings costumes was truly incredible, and Gandalf the White was no exception. Even though many of the details are hard to see on screen, his robes featured embroidered gold patterns and subtle elvish designs.
These designs here on the sleeve, elven designs, which is repeated through Elrond and other characters, so it's just been reworked into this costume. And then the undergarment is very much an elven fabric, which tied him into the elven world.
Some of these details were even hidden beneath the outer layers of the costume, meaning that the audience never sees them at all.
This immaculately embroidered gown can never be seen. There's no point in doing it, other than making me believe as I put them on that they're real clothes, which I do.
The same care went into details like engravings inside King Theoden's armor, something that Bernard Hill was the only person to ever see on the set. But despite all that craftsmanship, Ian McKellen still wasn't 100% happy with the costume.
But they never came up with any decent underwear for Gandalf. They did try. We started with a t-shirt, then we had a shirt, then we got a robe. It's 3 layers.
The attention to detail in the Lord of the Rings costumes was truly incredible, and Gandalf the White was no exception. Even though many of
This is an undetonated nuclear bomb, and it's highly radioactive. It looks very similar to the undetonated nuclear bomb that we remember from Megaton. If we creep close to it, we discover the ability to salvage components from it by passing a science skill of 60. If successful, we salvage 150 energy cells, 50 microfusion cells, and 2 sensor modules. Exploring closer, we see a big rectangular window into the bomb. This reveals the countdown timer inside, and we see that it's set to 9999. Could this perhaps explain why it never detonated? Now, we only find the 1 here if we have the Wild Wasteland trait. Without it, all we find is a blackened patch of sand. Therefore, we don't really know if finding the 1 here is canonical or not. This is an undetonated nuclear bomb, and it's highly radioactive. It looks very similar to the undetonated nuclear bomb that we remember from Megaton. If we creep close to it, we discover the ability to salvage components from it by passing a science skill of 60.
Cheers. Interestingly, you can make that plink sound on your own with a single glass and nothing inside but pure water. And all you have to do is shake it like this.
Or like this.
The glass needs to be a special shape. Though if you do get the shape right, not only do you get that clack sound, you also get a flash of light at the bottom there. The camera isn't picking it up, and actually I can't see it with my eyes either. But I believe it is possible to film that flash. Yes. Using this weird camera that makes me look a bit like an alien. I've been trying to get hold of one of these things for so long. It's an old Victorian curiosity called a water hammer. There's a company in America that sells them, but they don't ship to the UK. So I've been looking for someone to make one for me. Eventually I found Terry Adams, and actually I got her to make 2. The reason I got her to make 2 is, well, listen to this one. That makes the standard sloshing sound that you would expect, but this one makes that weird smacking sound. And interestingly, they both contain only water. So what's the difference? Well, this one only contains water in the casual sense. Like, this glass doesn't contain any sugar, it doesn't contain any flavorings, it only contains water. But if you wanted to be pedantic, you could say, well, it also contains air. And that's true for this one. It contains water and it contains air. Whereas this only contains water in the strict sense. You've got water here, and here it's a vacuum. It's not a perfect vacuum because some of the water will evaporate, so you've got water vapor in there, but it's a tiny amount. It's very close to a vacuum. What it means is when you slam the tube down and suddenly stop, the glass stops moving, but the water keeps going because it has momentum. And crucially, there's no air in the way to slow it down or break it up. So it races towards the end of the glass vial and slams into the bottom unimpeded, making a clap sound. A bit like clapping your hands together. But actually there's a bit more going on, which I didn't realize until I filmed it in slow motion. The water seems to bounce off the glass a little bit. So like there's a rebound. And so a second gap appears briefly after the first impact. That's called a cavitation bubble. You even get a second bounce, which is cool. And look here, on the rebounds, any cavities that happen to be floating around expand and collapse. So strange. Interestingly, the slosh sound you get with the vial that also has water in it is related to why raindrops have a maximum size. With the slosh tube, as I'm calling it, the air seems to push the water to one side, and so it sort of sloshes into the bottom of the vial. But in general, as everything's moving around in there, the air breaks up larger bodies of water into smaller droplets. And a similar thing happens when water falls out of the sky. Droplets grow in size when they collide and merge, but to see what happens when they fall, I've tried to recreate a kind of terminal velocity scenario here with a pipette and a hairdryer. See how this oversized drop is eventually broken up by the air pushing into it from below. But below a certain size, surface tension is enough to hold the droplet together against the force from the air. And it turns out the maximum size of a raindrop is about 8 millimeters. But anyway, that's why this sounds more like rain and less like someone clapping. Interestingly enough, the water hammer toy got its name before that water hammer sound you get in domestic plumbing, though they are somewhat related. This hammer sound depends on water being incompressible. If it was squishy, you wouldn't get that sharp sound when it hit the glass. Similarly, when you close a tap or a faucet in your house, all the incompressible water in your pipes is forced to come to a sudden stop, and so you get a bang. Practical Engineering already did a great video on that kind of water hammer, so I'll leave a link to that in the description. Interestingly, you don't need a sealed vial to experience this water hammer effect for yourself. All you need is a bottle half full of water and a mallet. And if you can hit the top of the bottle hard enough, and if the glass moves downwards fast enough, it actually leaves the water behind, so you end up with what's called a cavitation bubble at the bottom.
Wow.
Yeah, and just like with the water hammer tube, when the water comes down again and hits the bottom of the bottle, it makes that clack sound. Don't actually do it though, because if the water hits the bottom of the bottle with too much force, it can actually break the bottle. The reason the water bottle breaks, but this vial doesn't, is because, well, all we have here is the weight of the water pushing back down on the bottom of the vial. But in the case of the bottle, you also have all the atmospheric pressure pushing down on that water as well. So it slams into the bottom of the bottle, not just with the weight of the water, but with the weight of all the atmosphere above our heads.
I didn't know you had a high-speed camera. Can I have a go?
Bit of a tangent, but something I always wanted to try. What if when the water was slamming back down onto the bottom of the bottle, there was a tiny hole in the bottom of the bottle? Would you get like an incredibly powerful jet coming out of that hole? Of course, if there was a hole in the bottom of the bottle from the beginning, then you wouldn't get a vacuum cavitation in the first place because air would just rush in through the hole. So what I've got here is a bit of rubber gently stuck over the hole like a little valve. Let's see what happens. Unfortunately, the bottle still breaks, which is a shame because I was hoping that maybe we could turn it into some kind of powerful jet cutter or something like that, but I guess cavitation bubbles just aren't useful.
What about pistol shrimp?
Oh yeah.
What about those boat cleaners?
Eh?
What about mist makers?
Actually, ultrasonic mist makers are really cool. What happens in an ultrasonic mist maker is there's a piezoelectric speaker, essentially, that vibrates millions of times per second, so it's ultrasonic. And those vibrations travel up through the water until they get to the surface. And when they reach the surface, they create these ripples. In the same way that this speaker is creating ripples on the surface of the water here. And if you increase the amplitude of the vibrations, then the ripples get taller until they're so tall that they break off into droplets. It's the same principle behind the Chinese spouting bowl. Link in the description for that video. And you can do a similar thing with a cup of tea in a polystyrene cup. Crucially though, the size of the ripples depend on the frequency of the sound. So lower tones that have longer wavelengths produce wider ripples, whereas high frequency sounds like ultrasound have teeny tiny wavelengths, and so they produce teeny tiny ripples. And so when those teeny tiny ripples break up into drops, the drops are teeny tiny, and so you get a fine mist. So far that has nothing to do with cavitation, but it turns out you do need cavitation bubbles collapsing at the surface of that piezoelectric speaker if you want to get any mist at all. And that's because the cavitation bubbles, in a roundabout way, focus all that sound energy into a small enough point that you can actually launch these tiny droplets. So you can imagine this piezoelectric disc moving up and down millions of times per second. And that's far too fast for the water to be able to keep up. So when the disc moves up, it pushes the water up, but when it moves back down again, it leaves the water behind. It creates these vacuum cavitation bubbles. And crucially, these bubbles are being pressed from all sides. So when they collapse, they draw water in from above, but they also draw water in from the sides, which means you have this net movement of water upwards. The water's being pushed upwards, and then water's being drawn in from the sides to replace it. That creates a mini fountain above the piezoelectric speaker, this kind of rounded cone shape. And it's that cone that focuses the wave energy just to the very tip. And only when it's focused in that way do you have enough amplitude for the droplets to snap off from those ripples. Now, I mentioned earlier that the flash of light you get at the bottom of this vial is too dim to see, but my friend Andrea Sella has a slightly different version of this thing.
This is the little plink tube that I made.
You made that?
Yeah. I'm very
You've got
proud
some
of
good
it. Actually,
skills.
No, I used to have better skills than I do.
It has two unique features that might make the flash visible.
And what it's got is phosphoric acid.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, it's clearly not water. It's more viscous than that.
Acid has a much lower vapor pressure. All that means is there's much less vapor in this part of the tube. It's much closer to a vacuum. What that means is there's even less impeding the motion of the liquid. So when it hits the glass, it hits harder. The second thing it has is a constriction. Why is there a constriction? Why does it get narrower?
So the fluid comes in
Has
with
to go
momentum.
faster, right? Yeah.
The tube narrowing sort of accelerates it.
It's actually the principle behind this pool toy that you used to be able to buy. You can't get them anymore, but look, I 3D printed this miniature version. And when you push it into the water jets out of the top. But anyway, the result is that this tube has a much faster liquid and a much better vacuum. So the impact is a lot more energetic. And the more energetic the impact, the brighter the flash, which is why it's possible, even with the naked eye, to see this flash.
Oh, I think I saw, oh yeah, loads.
Whoa.
That's cool.
This is the best we managed to get on camera with the ISO jacked right up and the aperture open all the way. It's still very faint. But then I had an idea. I need a full spectrum camera, stat. Okay, before I show you the results that we got when we switched out to this weird sounding camera, where does this flash come from anyway? Well, in Andrea's tube, there's a tiny bit of xenon gas. So when the cavity collapses, there's a little bit of xenon being crushed together. And this is happening at supersonic speed, so there's no time for thermal energy to escape. The xenon gets so hot that it turns into a plasma. In other words, electrons are torn from the outer shells. So electrons and xenon ions are whizzing around like crazy. And when an electron flies near a xenon ion, it slows down a bit. And when a charged particle like an electron loses energy in this way, it's released as a photon of light. This is called Bremsstrahlung radiation, and it's the leading theory for why you get a flash. Okay, but here's the cool part. This is the spectrum of Bremsstrahlung radiation. And this is what gave me the idea for how we might be able to get a much better shot of that flash. See how most of the spectrum is in the ultraviolet? Human vision can only see this part here. So most of it, which is in the ultraviolet, we can't see. And because digital cameras want to mimic human eyes, digital cameras can only see this part too. But here's the thing, the silicon of a digital camera sensor is actually naturally sensitive to all this spectrum. So camera manufacturers have to add filters that cut out this part and this part so that things end up looking the same as how our eyes see things. But if you remove that filter, what you're left with is known as a full spectrum camera. Unfortunately, the glass of the tube actually blocks everything below this wavelength. By switching to a full spectrum camera, we gain this little bit of spectrum here that we wouldn't have otherwise. It is only a small range of wavelengths that we're adding, but it accounts for a huge amount of light because the spectrum ramps up into the ultraviolet. And look, there it is. How cool is that? Wow.
That's pretty good.
So good.
Right there, I think. There.
Yeah.
There.
I did not know you had a full spectrum camera. Can I have a go?
The pipes in our house also make a whistling sound sometimes, only when we run the hot tap though. My son thought that maybe there was one of those farting valve things in the pipes. If you're wondering what a farting valve is, well, it's one of these. And if you're wondering why my son is coming up with funny names for valves, it's because, well, a couple of these turned up in the most recent KiwiCo crate. KiwiCo is a subscription box where your kids get an exciting STEM project in the post every month. It's play tested like crazy, so there's never any glitches or roadblocks like having to go to the shops for supplies. And the instructions are really clear and the kids just love it. One of the best things about being a parent is watching your kids develop skills, like watching them slowly get into reading or whatever. And one of the cool things about KiwiCo is we've been watching our kids develop engineering skills like tool use and mechanical intuition, which is amazing to see. And it's something that they really want to do. Like I often find myself saying, sorry kids, you can't do KiwiCo right now because daddy has to film this one. This is KiwiCo's take on the bottle rocket, by the way, and it's cool because it's not just about pressure, there's chemistry in there as well. But after we discovered that valves can fart, we spent hours trying to track down the source of the sound in our own pipes. In the end, we discovered that the whining sound was caused by vortex shedding. You know, it's like this every month. You think it's just going to be a STEM project in a box, and the next thing you know, you're in the attic with your ear up against a pipe. And I love it. Go to kiwico.com/SteveMold and use code SteveMold at checkout to get 50% off your first monthly crate. The link is also in the description, so check out KiwiCo today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe, and the algorithm thinks you'll enjoy this video next.